You know, many of us have heard, and it's made national news about Charlie Kirk being assassinated in Utah yesterday in front of not only his audience and a large crowd, but his wife and children. And there's been so many different takes about Charlie Kirk in terms of they're like, well, this is his words coming back to this is his chickens coming home to roost. They talk about him talking about empathy. They talk about the Second Amendment and all his stances on that. And I think I look at the fact that Charlie Kirk, in some ways, held a moral high ground, and that he was willing to meet ideas with ideas. He was willing to meet words with words, whereas somebody met his words with violence. And it's very interesting. I'm watching so many people celebrate. I'm watching so many people celebrate like, oh yeah, like, goodness gracious, people treated Charlie Kirk like he was evil, talked about him like he was evil. And what's interesting to me is that everybody is all for getting rid of evil until it is shown that they have evil within themselves. That it is very easy to demonize everyone else until somebody shows that you have demons within yourself. And then all of a sudden, things change. You want understanding. You want empathy. You want the very thing that you were not willing to give. And I think about Charlie Kirk and his debates, right? And debates are just an organized way of having conflict. There's rules involved in it. There was conflict. And if you can't beat me on my ideas, then guess what you do? You try to beat me physically. You can't beat me with the ideas, so you have to play. You have to cheat. And for whatever reason, the person that killed him, that assassinated him, felt, I don't know what they felt, but I can say that they felt that the world was a better place without Charlie Kirk being in it. Now, black people particularly, when I look at people who had issues with Charlie Kirk, I look at them kind of sideways because it's like, yeah, you can have issue with what he said. Granted, that's fair. But to be so emotionally tied up in what he said, to be so emotionally affected by what he said, lets me know that you aren't really about that life. What do I mean? You're not willing to go out and debate your ideas on the open stage, on the national and on the world stage, and have your ideas critiqued. You haven't thought that much about your ideas. You haven't thought that much about your positions. You haven't thought about the other person's positions. You haven't analyzed your own position or the other person's position enough to even give a solid critique. And you know that the moment that you're put in front of somebody who has studied more than you, who has analyzed the issue more than you, who has gone back and forth about that particular issue more than you feel intimidated. And instead of dealing with the ideas, it's easier to get mad, it's easier to get angry, versus staying on track with the ideas, staying on track with the position, staying on track with the argument. I really, I'm tired of people I'm tired of people who do not display human decency. That I'm tired of people who can point out the flaws in others but not point out their own flaws. What do I mean by that? I'm tired of people that become the very evil, become the very things that they detest, and then justify it based upon whatever reason. Charlie Kirk said he thought empathy was made up, and yet the folks that are begging and clamoring for empathy now can't find empathy within their own heart. I really don't think that many people stand for things. I really don't. I really don't. And I've seen it. I've seen it that people say that they stand for certain things, or that they stand for certain things, but that's not really what you stand for. That's not really what you're willing to die about. That's not what you're willing to kill about. It's okay, but be honest with yourself, right? If it doesn't If it doesn't feed your family, if it doesn't protect your family, then why are you that emotionally invested in it? If it doesn't cause harm to your family, if it doesn't cause harm to you, why are you so emotionally invested in it? And that's not to say that people shouldn't care about things, but I think that people should really prioritize where they put their emotions, where they put their time, where they put their energy, and where they put their focus on. Think about the people that focus on the downfall of others. Rarely do you ever see those people successful. It's an interesting time for our country because this is going to usher in an era of domestic terrorism and political violence. Political violence is domestic terrorism, point blank, period. And it makes me be like, bruh, you need to write that second part of the paper. My first paper was militarized police and unpermitted protests, implementing policy that civilizes America's police. And the second paper is militarized protest and militarized protest and civilized police, America's measured response to domestic terrorism. I need to go ahead and get that paper written. But I knew that I knew that we were headed towards an era of political violence or domestic terrorism. I told the Louisiana Judicial Council back in 2020, February 2020, that the judiciary is the last bastion of our quote unquote republic, our quote unquote democracy, but definitely the last bastion of our quote unquote republic. Problem is that the courts, what happens when the American people lose faith and lose trust in the court system? What do I mean by that? See, the two parties that are in a courtroom is the executive branch and the judicial branch. The executive branch through the prosecutor's office, and the judicial branch in terms of the judge. What happens when it seems as if the judiciary is taking or helping the government instead of helping the people? When we look at that power dynamic, right? It's all of it is the government, the legislative branch who makes the laws, the executive who executes the laws, the judiciary who adjudicates the laws. What happens when you stand in this government courtroom full of government employees and you feel as a citizen that the executive is already against you, and you definitely don't have a friend in the judiciary? And are we supposed to have a friend in the judiciary? I would say that the judiciary is supposed to protect our constitutional rights. And how can you, as a citizen, get railroaded because you didn't necessarily have the best attorney when the judge is there to ensure that your constitution, when we think that the judge is there to ensure that your constitutional rights are protected? And it's not. They're not there for that. The judges act more like referees. And are you following the rules? What happens when you feel as a citizen that the government, in terms of the executive, and the government in terms of the judiciary, can no longer be trusted? This is really a time of real political division in this country. And it's not because Donald Trump or whatever people want to say. Our country has been headed in this direction for a very long time. Anytime that you have a discriminatory nature of how you apply laws, you are headed for a system that is imbalanced. When there is imbalance in a dynamic system, you're going to have a lot of vibrations. It's like when you get your tires rotated and they're putting weights in specific places so that as the car is rolling, it's rolling smooth versus it's rolling with a bunch of wobble. What happens is when you have an unbalanced system and it's turning and it's turning, there's a lot of wobble. And when there's too much wobble, it can actually wreck the entire car, can make the entire car unstable. And that's what's going on with our government right now, is that there's a lot of imbalances in our system. And the one balance that we're supposed to have is the balance of the power of the government and the freedoms and rights and protections of the people. And we're seeing those protections and those rights of the people being stripped away. And it's cause for alarm. It's cause for alarm. Some folks would be tripping about it, but it's like there's been folks that have been sounding the alarm. And people think, oh, it's because of Trump. No. This militarized police stuff, you know who made it big? Who upped the funding by billions of dollars? President Obama. With the DoD 1055 transfer program, excess transfer program, excess use program, that was done by Obama. All Trump is doing is utilizing the very power that's available to him. And what's scary for a lot of people is that they've been done wrong by the government, but have never been in a position of power to get payback and get retribution, to make things better for themselves and others. And Trump is in a position to do that. Remember, this man was looking at 300 some odd years, 300 some odd years in jail. And you thought that he was going to come back lightly, softly, gently? Not at all. God save the republic. The real question is are Christians praying for their leaders as the Bible commands them to? You're supposed to pray for Trump even if you don't like him. You're supposed to pray for Biden even if you don't like him. You're supposed to pray for Obama even if you didn't like him. You're supposed to pray for Bush even if you didn't like him. You're supposed to pray for Clinton even if you didn't like him. You're supposed to pray for Daddy Bush even if you didn't like him. You're supposed to pray for Reagan if you didn't like him. You know, it's just very interesting to me. Very, very interesting to me. When you take all of these things in consideration, that the fact that once again people said that oh well, they're going to take away all of our rights and take away all of our freedoms, yet aren't moving and acting like it. Okay, so that means that you're going to be running for office, right? Oh well, no. Okay, well, you're making it somebody else's responsibility, sounds like to me, that you're putting your freedom in somebody else's hands, that instead of utilizing the power and agency that you have, you're allowing somebody else to make decisions and determine your future, and not determine the future in which you might see fit, but determine the future in which they might see fit. And if you're a beneficiary of it, then great. Americans have nobody else to blame except for themselves, because when the system was working for you, when the system was doing overreaches on your behalf, you didn't have a problem with it. But now that it's overreaching on something that you don't agree with, now it's a problem. This is why standards, this is why the Constitution is so important. Rules for thee, but not for me. This has been a long time in the making. America's in for a very rude awakening, for a great shaking. Then all God's people can do is sit there and pray and prepare. Point blank, period. Pray and prepare. Prepare your finances. Set up a nest egg. Put some money away. Don't be distracted during this time. It's rough. It's rough. But don't be distracted. Y'all be blessed.